Okay, so we're going to bring on Eric Engels from Sportsnet.ca and just Sportsnet. I don't even know, do I just say Eric Engels of Sportsnet, or do you prefer Sportsnet.ca? Do you guys care about that?
You can say whatever you want. I work for both. I'm a senior columnist at Sportsnet and an insider on the Montreal Canadiens in the NHL.
And a hater of the Montreal Canadiens,
Yeah.
as it turns out. Question number one, how quickly were you blocked by former scouts?
You know
Answer
what?
the question. Now! This is my show. Sorry.
Oh, my.
Boy, you really lit the world on fire with this one. Canadiens playoff hopes all but shot with loss to Red Wings. I think I saw a Dmitry Filipovich tweet last night that said 27% of all Red Wings wins this season have come against the Montreal Canadiens.
It's amazing.
Eric, how many people from the Montreal Canadiens organization don't want to talk to you this morning?
Yeah, there's none really. I mean, I don't think I'm saying anything that they're not aware of. This is a situation that's devolved over the last couple of weeks with injuries to key players and Jonathan Drouin and Brendan Gallagher, Joel Armia, Paul Byron, and there's not many teams in the league that can do, that can work miracles with three top six forwards out and a fourth who's a top nine forward. And yeah, people will point to the Pittsburgh Penguins, but they're the anomaly. They're not the rule. Any team that loses this caliber of players is going to have issues. And given the fact that they went through an 8-game winless streak in November, it didn't help their positioning. It's amazing. They went to the Christmas break on a winning streak and in second place in the Atlantic Division, and boom, it's all come apart in a couple of weeks. And look, I look at the way the Toronto Maple Leafs play, and I look at the way the Tampa Bay Lightning play. And I know people are excited in Toronto with what's gone on under Keefe, but they could easily go on a losing streak from here to the end of the season, and so could Tampa Bay with the way they play. 2 games that I watched them play against Montreal, they probably should have lost both of them, but they ended up winning because the Canadiens have fragile confidence right now. But even all of that considered, the reason I wrote what I wrote is because there's 4 teams between the Canadiens and the wild card position, which they're 7 points behind. And even if Tampa or Toronto goes on a losing streak here, the competition is so thick that it just makes more sense to the Canadiens to start considering who they're going to move off their roster going to the trade deadline. Because if you really look at it, Cole Caulfield will be here next season. Alexander Romanov will be here next season, and both of them are going to be with the big club, I believe. If they make one good summer acquisition, who are the Canadiens next season? I think they could be a pretty good team. So it's an interesting situation, a difficult one, obviously, for the people in the organization to digest. And my column last night is just telling it how it is.
So, well, exactly. And you're saying 3 very legitimate things, man. They have so many injuries. They've been losing all these games by 1 goal. Mm-hmm. They have such a great pipeline of prospects, but I'm wondering where the patience is for Marc Bergevin, because I feel like we've fired him 5 times over 5 years on the show, and it's just never going to happen. There's sort of arguments on both sides. Where's the patience at for the Montreal Canadiens?
Well, I mean, I think that the real question is where the patience is in the fan base, and I know that it's certainly running out. They want to see results, and they see this as a colossal failure. But at the end of the day, I evaluate Marc Bergevin's work in segments, and you look at the first 5.5 years of his job, there was just about everything that he did was good. And then he went through a 1.5-year phase where everything he did was bad. And I thought that at the end of that 1.5 years, at the end of the 2017-18 season, he deserved to lose his job. There was just so much bad there, whether it was the Alzner, Hemsky, straight signings and letting Radulov and Markov go in hardline negotiations, and the team going from first in the Atlantic Division to 28th place in the league. Those were all reasons, especially from the trade deadline the year before that up until all the decisions I just mentioned, that Marc Bergevin probably deserved to lose his job at the time. But once Jeff Molson stood beside him and said, look, if you look at the other 5 years there and all the good that he did, I'm not going to react this quickly and just gas him at the first opportunity, it really set Bergevin up on a successful path, because there was only one path to take the Canadiens on, and it was to build more for the long-term future than the short-term. And Bergevin's commitment to that has been unwavering. so far, and he said it several times that he won't trade away prospects for a quick fix. And the prospect pool that he's built up since that time is one of the most impressive ones in the National Hockey League, and I think they've made a lot of decisions to improve on the development side. Whether it's bringing in Joe Bouchard at the American Hockey League level with Alex Burrows on that staff, to bring Dominic Ducharme and Luke Richardson to the Canadiens bench, and the hiring of Claude Julien. So, there's a lot of good in the development, and there's a lot of good in the drafting, and the long-term plan looks healthy because with these young players coming along, there are some veteran players here in Montreal who are still on the upside of their career that are important players for the Canadiens, whether it's Max Domi, Jonathan Drouin, who was busting out before breaking his wrist this year, or I should say ripping a tendon in his wrist. Shea Weber is putting together a Norris Trophy campaign this season. If not for John Carlson, he'd probably be at the top of the list. Carey Price obviously has been mercurial. He's either been great or awful, and that's not what you want to see from the guy you're paying that much. But I believe that if there was a good team in front of him, he'd probably turn a lot of heads, and a lot of people who are doubting him would say, oh yeah, that's what he's supposed to look like. So it's a strange situation, but that's where it is with Bergevin. I don't believe that even a playoff miss this year is going to cost him his job.
I know how this is going to work out. Because I remember a year where the Habs were very good, and then they were mysteriously bad, and somehow ended up with the 3rd overall pick and went right back to being very good. Mm-hmm. So you're a reporter. You get to do lots of interviews, have lots of fun. What is the number one thing you're looking forward to asking Lafreniere next year?
Well, I mean, there's all kinds of juicy storylines around Lafreniere. The primary one being that the draft is being held in Montreal this year, and the Canadiens still have 12 picks in it. I don't know what they're going to be able to do to swing things in their favor to get him, but I think Detroit has a pretty healthy edge in the race. That said, it's an 18% chance if you finish last overall in the league to draft first overall, and stranger things have happened in the lottery, and Leafs fans can attest to that.
Yeah.
Certainly Sabres fans can attest to that, and Oilers fans can attest to that. The Canadiens also, no matter who they strip off the roster, no matter what they do, they're a team with a lot of heart, and they're going to compete from here to the end. I didn't write that it's all completely dead last night. I think, if somehow miraculously they win the next 6 games going into the bye week, it changes the picture once again, because after the bye week, you're going to get Armia and Drouin back, and Gallagher should be back between now and then, and Byron could be back, and who knows if the Canadiens can put together 27 wins in the last 38 games. I certainly would not be delusional to the point where I would suggest they're going to do it. But stranger things have happened. So before we start talking about Alexis Lafreniere, there's still 38 games left in the season, and it's hard to completely discount where they're going to be.
If you do, let's say they play 500 from here on out, and they are... and they're in a position where you said, where they have to start considering moving guys off the roster. Who would that be? Because a lot of the guys that you named are they're prominent players. At least the players that are playing well. So, what players from Montreal would garner a lot of interest, and who do you think that they'd be willing to move on from if the price was right?
Well, Thomas Tatar is the guy at the top of the list, and he leads the Canadiens with 37 points. He's got 16 goals in 44 games. He's played great, and he's put up 95 points in 120-odd games with the Canadiens since coming over in the deal with Vegas. So that's a guy that went for a first, second, and third round pick to Vegas at the 2018 deadline. What's he worth now at 29 years old and with 1 year left on a deal, whereas before he had 4 years left? So
right,
that's a guy who should be able to net them a first-round pick and a good prospect. And it's hard to say no to trading that guy, even though he could be a key player next year for them, when you have Kotkaniemi coming up and Suzuki coming up the middle, and you could move Max Domi to left wing, and you have Jonathan Drouin at left wing, and you have Paul Byron at left wing. Those are good options that make it palatable to potentially lose Tatar and recuperate a first-round pick and a top-end prospect. Jeff Petrie is another guy that's going to garner a lot of interest. I don't think Marc Bergevin is going to actively shop him because I think he sees him as a piece he'd like to re-sign down the line, and especially given that even though Cale Fleury looks like he's got top four potential, we're still a couple of years away from that, so the Canadiens don't necessarily have a replacement in the system for what Petrie brings if they trade him with 1 year left on his deal. But I can guarantee you that even though he has a 15-team no-trade list, there's going to be a lot of teams that are calling Marc Bergevin about that player. He's a top-end right-handed defenseman, and he can help a lot of teams.